Good morning. Welcome to our second installment of our webcast for the Standards Rollout and Implementation Plan. My name is Krista Hall, and I currently serve as the Director of Program Standards. And today I have with me Mickey Ray, and she serves as our Secondary Literacy Consultant. Last week we were able to bring with you the information about building your district and your school level teams to help with the implementation. And today Mickey is going to share with us the resources and supports around the professional learning modules for the reading and writing standards. While we are doing this, please remember, if you have any questions that you want to ask, you can go to gosoapbox.com. The access code is OTL, and then at the conclusion, we will answer as many questions as we possibly can. So Mickey, are you ready?
All right, I am.
Great.
Well, thank you so much for being with us this morning. I'm happy to be able to talk about the resource. It was definitely created with schools and districts in mind to be support for teachers and other stakeholders as they're starting the implementation process. So the first thing that I would like to do is talk a little bit about the design of the module. As you know, it is entitled the Getting to Know the Kentucky Academic Standards for Reading and Writing, and it's meant to be a resource for developing an understanding of the new standards and all of the new components that are woven into the CAS for reading and writing. Ideally, it's meant to be utilized before standards alignment and curriculum work in order to build knowledge and capacity around the standards and to capitalize on the opportunity to improve teaching and learning. And we know that teachers and others who are making decisions about curriculum and instructional materials and student experiences, they will be able to make wiser choices with that foundation in the standards and their understanding of the standards and the expectations for students at each grade level and within each grade band. The module itself contains 7 sections. Each section of module 1 is designed to be administered in a 45-minute PLC session. And we chose this as the means for support because the PLC model, that says to teachers, we value you, we value your time, we value this work, and we value the collaboration that occurs as a result of those conversations that happen in the PLC. And we know that it's the conversations. A standards document is just that. It's just a document. So it's the conversations that those teachers will have within this PLC environment around the module that will really lead to changes within the student experience. So we felt like, again, although, of course, schools and districts will choose how to facilitate this module, that ultimately we felt it was best served in the PLC. Another thing to consider are the module facilitators, and they may include, but are not limited to, district leaders, school administrators, instructional specialists and coaches, department chairs, and of course teacher leaders. And in fact, in the design of this, I was thinking about department chairs or grade level lead teachers, but no matter what, keeping that in mind, the facilitator notes include content information and instructional support intended to provide support to a facilitator who may or may not have an extensive background in literacy. So we wanted anyone to be able to engage with this document in a way that they could go into the sessions feeling confident and feeling equipped to provide that information to the stakeholders, to all of the participants who are a part of each of those sessions. In order to gain access to the module, you should visit the new website, the kystandards.org, and you'll see there that on that website, the first thing that I want to point out, just as a reminder, there is a subscribe feature. So if you were to click on that plus sign, or in some cases it looks like a little box, you can enter in your name and email address and select the standards for which you would like to receive information, updates, or announcements. And so in this case, again, if your background is in literacy, if you're an English teacher, or if you're working with reading and writing standards, you would want to select the reading and writing subscribe. Now, to actually access the module, you'll want to click on that yellow button that's entitled Your Standards Resources. And when you do, you'll get to a screen that looks just like this, and you will want to click on Reading and Writing. And so underneath that tab, you'll see that there is the Facilitators Guide. So that is a PDF document that is interactive. It includes hyperlinks and all of the resources that will be needed in order to conduct the actual sessions. There's also the PowerPoint that is included included. And the warning that we want to give about the PowerPoint, and Maggie Doyle, the mathematics consultant, she always says that 80% of the actual learning occurs within the facilitator's guide. And she's the math person, so I'm certainly not going to disagree with her on that. But again, you know that the PowerPoint itself, you can't possibly have everything within a PowerPoint that you would want to pass along to participants. So it's the facilitator's guide that has that additional support for whomever is conducting the session. And then there is one other new feature that you'll notice today as a result of the webcast. We've created a Module 1 at a glance document that highlights the key objective and the key features of each section of the particular module. So that is going to be there for you today as well. So when you go into the PDF of the module, you'll see here, it looks just like this. So that is the facilitator's guide. And the first thing that I would like to point out is just, again, the different sections. And so I'm going to spotlight section 1 on this particular slide. So at the very beginning, we know that teachers are critical thinkers, and they want to understand the why. They want to understand the rationale for standards revision. So section 1A gives an overview of that revision process. And it's going to talk about Senate Bill 1. It's going to talk about how Kentucky educators were a part of this process. And for me, as a consultant, that has been one of the most powerful things about having the opportunity to be in this position, to see those teachers creating this document for other teachers. So that's there. It is the exact same thing in the mathematics module, and it will also be the same in the social studies module that will be posted once those standards, again, are officially adopted. So you could even utilize this portion of the module in a whole group faculty meeting or session. The next thing that you'll notice are the materials, and we wanted this to be something that was easy to use. So everything that the facilitator could possibly need to conduct the session and to really spark the learning that's going to happen within the session is found within the module itself. So again, there is the facilitator's guide, there are participant handouts, there are supporting materials for that facilitator, and all of those things are embedded within the facilitator's guide itself. So the hyperlinks are there. So that, again, it also becomes just like the web stop is a sort of one-stop shop. The facilitator's guide bears that same sort of function. And then also you do have, of course, the slides. If you take a look at the goals, we really tried to keep the goals in mind throughout the entire module, and we keep coming back to those throughout each of the sessions. And I just want to spotlight the second bullet there. So one of the goals is to strengthen the connection between the components of the CAS for reading and writing, the standards document itself, and the way those components can support teachers in the process of designing standards-aligned instruction and grade-level assignments. So the module is intended to build that foundation of knowledge about the standards themselves, but because it is a document that was created for teachers by teachers, it is super important to allow teachers the time and the space to be able to investigate those components so that they can start making those decisions about standards alignment, so they can have those conversations about teaching and learning and what those student experiences will look like as a result of the new standards. So that's an innate portion and component of this particular document. Now, section B, I wanted to actually show you what this would look like on the page. So you can see here you have the facilitator notes. So it looks very scripted, but we don't want anyone to feel limited by that. But we also wanted to support those folks, again, who do not necessarily have that background in literacy. But because this is new learning, it's new learning for everyone, even those folks who do have a background in literacy. We wanted to provide that added support. So there will always be the facilitator notes and those connections to the accompanying slides that they'll be using within the session. The other thing that I wanted to say, though, just to the audience today, I would argue that section B, understanding the architecture, is the single most important section within the module. I've been receiving some emails about teachers who have been asked to do presentations over the standards, or the fact that schools are going to have kind of a one-day training around the standards, and I always point people to this section of the module. So this section, again, it's going to explain the overall organization organizational structure of the document. It provides the different ways to view the standards, the grade level view, the breakdown view, and those progressions, and all of the design considerations of the specific components within the standards document. So if you are needing something to support an explanation of what the new document is, what it looks like, how everything is organized, you're going to want to come back here. And I think that the most important part of that, if you take a look at the next slide, again, there are additional notes that support the facilitator as they're working through this document. So this goes back to, again, Maggie's point about the 80%, because here you can see there are those additions that are woven within the facilitator's guide. And then I also want to show you on this page, you can sort of see, or I hope you can, that there are reflection questions. And so I feel like these reflection questions are going to be super important for guiding the conversations around the function of those new components. Again, the teachers wanted the standards document to be something that was utilized regularly, that is engaged regularly by teachers, and that really can only happen if teachers have a reason to go to the document and have a desire to want to use the components that are found within that document. And so this section of the module builds the rationale for teachers engaging in the document itself. And it's going to show them the different supports that those other teachers provided for them so that they can have discussions about instruction and student experience. So all of that, again, is found within that first section. Section B about the architecture. Now, one of the questions that you would have seen on that particular slide within Section B is talking about the difference between the standards versus the practices. And we know that that's going to be an area of learning that's needed for teachers. And as a result of that, there is one section that focused primarily on the interdisciplinary literacy practices. And this Section 1C takes a more in-depth look at the purpose and function of those new interdisciplinary literacy practices. It's going to spotlight the differences because there is a clear difference in the reading and writing document between the function of the standards and the function of those practices. And it really allows the participants a chance to explore how the practices fit together like a puzzle to support, equip, and empower students as they build their own capacity to read and to write and to grow in terms of their own literacy practice. Within this particular section of the module, there is a discovery task that I wanted to mention. And that discovery task is going to use just a general ELA assignment, and it'll allow teachers a safe space to think about how this particular teacher allowed students to engage with the practices. So I'm going to bring up that slide so you can see what that looks like. So here again, the teachers will be asked, where do you see connections to the literacy practices in the instructional process and or the focusing question? So as people are learning about what those practices are, teacher actions around the practices, student actions around the practices, they're using this particular assignment focus as a lens for that. And then at the end of that section, they're asked to think about their own instructional process, something that perhaps even happened within that very day or something that they're planning, for the first week of school, where they could utilize those practices more intentionally to support student learning. The next section is unpacking the multidimensionality. And for me personally, I'm very excited about this feature. I think it's so helpful in helping all stakeholders, all educators to understand the depth and rigor of the standards that are within the document. So within this section, again, it's going to spotlight how this feature, the multidimensionality feature, can support teachers specifically in the process of designing standards-aligned instruction and creating grade-level assignments. So you can use the dimension of the standards in order to make sure that students are in fact engaging with those standards to the full depth, through the content, through comprehension, and through analysis. So within this particular section of the module, there are, and I'm going to move on here to the next slide, there are discovery tasks for different grade levels that are really meant to highlight standards alignment. And again, this is meant to be a safe and non-threatening sort of thing so that people can really start thinking about, well, these were the tasks that a teacher identified for this particular assignment. Is that truly aligned to the grade level standards that are intended? intended. So within the reading and writing module, there's one for second grade, there's an example for fifth grade, for eighth grade, and then also for grades 11 and 12. And so we hope again that this will be helpful for participants to really start thinking about the difference between the standards that we once had in the CAS for ELA and the demands and expectations for the new standards within the reading and writing document. And all of that is housed right here within the Facilitators guide. So all of those hyperlinks are there for the facilitator as they're working through the sessions. The next section is a spotlight on early literacy, and we have said at the CAS leadership meetings that much of the revision to the reading and writing document, there are multiple revisions to the early literacy standards, and really for the entire elementary band. So I worked with Whitney Hamilton, who is the elementary consultant, who is just amazing, and with her support, we created this section of the module to support elementary teachers, and it gets very specific. It does talk about trends of changes, but it goes through each strand. So it starts with foundational skills and moves on through all of the reading strands, the writing strand, and the language strands to point out changes that have occurred within the document. I wanted to mention, though, in terms of the discovery task for this particular section, it takes, there's a Word document, and it takes the language of the existing CAS for ELA, so what will be the old standards, and it asks teachers to take a look at the revised standards, and then it's not just doing that for the sake of just seeing the change, but to really start thinking about the instructional implications of that. So I'm hearing a lot of conversations currently about schools that are wanting to do this work, and they're kind of jumping to this part of the work, and clearly it is critical. That's an important part. You do want to understand the changes between the old and the new, but I would also argue that that same level of attention and time and focus needs to be put into simply understanding the document and how the document is created to support teachers as they're moving into what the instructional implications will be. So within this particular portion of the module, you'll see linked in the actual discovery task. It is there for teachers, but I want you to take a look at the questions that are here. So they do that sort of learning in order to think about, number one, what will students have to be able to do now that the old standard did not require of them? And number two, how can my instruction, how can what we're doing within the classroom truly support student learning for meeting the expectations of that new standard? So I think both of those components have to happen, and the module structure, excuse me, the module structure supports that in a safe space and allows for those conversations and collaboration so that teachers feel equipped and so that they feel empowered to start looking at that within their department and within their own classrooms. So I think that's a powerful component. The last two sections, I've listed them here for you. There are additional instructional implications, and again, Section F presents an overview of those implications, and I just wanted to mention what those were. So the instructional implications include the balance of building knowledge and applying skills and strategies. It discusses text complexity, text distribution and types, 21st century literacy, and writing program considerations. So this is not something that may be as pressing right at this given moment, but they are larger things that we hope that educators will begin to discuss and think about throughout the implementation year. So it's so tempting to be overwhelmed and to think about everything must be completed right now, before August, before we see our students again. But we know that that's not really possible. So within these sections of the module, for Section F, these are things that will be ongoing and that you could talk about throughout the course of that next year. And then lastly is Section G, which includes a wrap-up and next steps. And so we have created planning guides, planning documents. There's one for teachers, there's one for school leadership, and there's also one for district leadership that allows teachers and others to begin thinking about, well, what is the next step? How can we prioritize our needs? How can we prioritize what needs to be done? And it's just, again, it's a planning guide. So you may have something else that you would like to utilize, but on our part, we wanted to provide that for you. And then there's also a link for feedback. This document, this module even, is a living document. If there are things that are confusing, if there's information that you need, then we want to be able to go in and make adjustments and changes. But we also want to know where you're going to need support. So in what areas? Is that going to be related to content? Maybe it's even related to a particular standard so that we can look at that and provide that support. Perhaps it's something connected to instruction. So at any point, you never have to wait until the end. You don't have to complete all sections before completing the feedback. At any point, as a district leader, as a school leader, as a classroom teacher, as any educator can go in and get into that survey and provide feedback so that we can be responsive to your needs. So Krista's going to come and talk about the 5 things to know before you go. But again, I just thank you so much for this opportunity. If you have any other questions, and there may be some soapbox questions today, but I'm just happy to be able to talk to you about the module. I hope that it will be a useful resource for you as you begin taking these next steps toward implementation. So thank you.
Thank you, Mickey. And as Mickey said, if you do have any additional questions, I'll give you a few minutes to get those in while I'm going through the 5 things to know before you go. So the first thing, looking back, last week's session was on choosing focus team members and making a plan. This focused on choosing your district and school focus teams. Once those are in place, then you can begin moving forward with planning for the implementation. So that has to occur first. Number 2, choosing facilitators, exactly what Mickey was just talking about. A big part of that planning is the getting to know your standards module. So choosing the best person or team of people to facilitate that learning is crucial. Giving facilitators the time and resources to prepare the PLC structure to accomplish that work will be very important. The June conference, we've had excellent response to that. The registration is open for the June CAS Learning Lab conference. This is on the KY Standards page that we mentioned. It is in this conference will take place the second week in June, on June 10th, 12th, and 14th. On the 10th, we're in Christian County. On the 12th, we are in Carter County. And on the 14th, we are in Fayette County. So you can find the link to the registration on our website. Number 4, kystandards.org. This is the website where we will be putting everything standards at this point. Once again, this is where the registration link can be found under the standards resources under just released. Don't forget the subscribe button that Mickey mentioned as well. And then last, next week's webcast will be on the professional learning modules for the newly revised mathematics standards. So it will be the component to what Mickey did today, but actually talking about the mathematics. So let me look at what questions that we have. One thing on the soapbox today, Jackie, who spoke with us last week, she has been on here answering many of your questions. So if you see them, you might already see some of the answers, but I will bring those up for those that may just be watching and not have this up. It says, there was a question about was the PowerPoint sent for the last webcast, and it was sent out with the email, but we will also be housing those materials on the kystandards.org page along with these videos as they are archived. So we will keep that there as well. Do we have a timeline for additional modules? We are currently having modules developed and are developing modules, but we do not have a rollout timeline per se. We're being very strategic about what we roll out, making sure that we have the capacity to support you in this work. I think we've all had many times where we've been given some tremendous resources, but we haven't had the support behind those resources or the time to really dig into them, and they've not gotten the attention that they really need it to get. And so we are trying to avoid that.
And I would say too, we also want your feedback. So as you're completing the module, as you're going into that last section and giving us feedback on what supports you do need, then we can be responsive to that as well.
And that's an excellent point, Mickey, because just as we do with students in our classroom, we are trying to stay very true to that responsiveness. And as we said in March, we think we know what you're going to need, but you know what you need. And so if we're off the mark, we want that feedback. Or if you need more of something, then we want to work to develop that and support you in that way.
Absolutely.
So it looks like we have concluded with all of the questions. Once again, we will be same time next week, Thursday at 9 o'clock, and we'll dive into mathematics next week. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.